She was humiliated right in the golden lobby of the seven-star hotel, bent over wiping a table beneath the crystal chandelier. A female receptionist scoffed. "Careful! If you wipe the guest's feet by mistake, you'll lose your job." The manager waved her off, ordering her to disappear before the royal entourage arrived. But when Sheikh Fadil began speaking in ancient Arabic and no one understood a word, it was Amira the maid who had been pushed aside, who looked up and echoed every syllable in perfect Hadrami dialect. The room went dead silent. The Sheikh stood, eyes narrowed. "Where did you learn that? Or were you once one of us?" The lobby was all gold and glass, sparkling under lights that cost more than most people's houses. Amira Collins, 29, stood there in her plain white blouse and black skirt, her dark brown hair tied back tight. No makeup, no jewelry, just a rag in her hand and a bucket by her feet. She'd been cleaning for hours, her hands red from the polish, her back sore from bending. The receptionist, a woman with sharp red nails and a designer scarf, leaned over the counter smirking. "You missed a spot," she said, pointing at nothing. Amira nodded, said nothing, and kept wiping. She was used to this people looking at her, like she was less than the marble floor she cleaned. They saw the uniform, the quiet way she moved, and assumed she was nobody. But Amira wasn't nobody, not even close. The hotel was buzzing that day. Sheikh Fadil, bin Nasser oil tycoon, was coming with his entourage. The staff had been prepping for weeks, polishing every surface, practicing their smiles. Amira didn't care much for the fuss. She just did her job, moving from table to table, making sure the lobby gleamed. But the manager, a wiry man with a permanent scowl, spotted her near the entrance. "Move," he hissed, waving his arms like she was a stray dog. "Don't stand there in plain sight." Amira stepped back, her eyes low, her hands folding the rag. The receptionist laughed, loud enough for the whole lobby to hear. Letting a maid stand near the sheikh ruins the prestige. A few guests nearby chuckled their eyes, sliding over Amira like she was part of the furniture. She bowed her head, apologized softly, and slipped toward the corner. But her eyes, sharp intelligent, stayed on the sheikh's group as they walked in. A group of young influencers dripping in branded clothes and gold watches lounged nearby, snapping selfies with the chandelier in the background. One of them, a woman with a fake tan and a loud laugh, noticed Amira. "Oh my God, look at her shoes," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did you steal those from a thrift store?" Her friends cackled, one pretending to gag. Amira's hand stilled on the table, her plain black flats scuffed but clean. She didn't look up, just kept wiping, her movements slow and deliberate. The influencer leaned closer, her phone out, filming. "Smile for my story, maid lady," she taunted. Amira's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She turned slightly, her eyes catching the influencers for a split second long enough to make the woman flinch and look away. "Hey, before we go on, can you do me a quick favor? Grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to keep sharing stories like this. Stories about people who get knocked down, but still stand tall. Thanks for being here with me." The sheikh entered like he owned the place, which in a way he did. His robes were crisp, his presence heavy. His aides followed, all suits and sunglasses, their voices low and clipped. The hotel staff scrambled to bow, to smile, to offer drinks. Amira stayed in her corner, wiping down a side table nobody used. She was supposed to be invisible, but she couldn't help hearing the sheikh's voice. He sat in a velvet chair, glanced around, and started speaking in ancient Arabic, a dialect so old most scholars only read it in books. "No one here understands us," he said to his aides. "Speak freely." They began discussing a deal buying oil fields near a border, risky and controversial. One aide, a nervous man with a twitching mustache, muttered, "If anyone's recording, we're doomed." Amira's hand paused on the table. She shook her head slightly, almost like she was disagreeing with the air. Then she pulled out her phone, not to record, but to open an app she had built herself, one that translated ancient dialects in real time. A hotel guest, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, noticed her phone and sneered. "What's this, playing games on the job?" He leaned toward the manager, his voice loud. "You let your staff slack off like this." The manager's face flushed, and he stormed over, hissing at Amira. "Put that away. You're embarrassing us." Amira slipped the phone into her pocket, her expression unchanged. "I was checking something," she said softly. The guest laughed, turning to the crowd. "Checking something? Like how to mop better?" The laughter spread, sharp and cruel. Amira's fingers curled around the edge of her bucket, but she didn't respond. She just picked it up and moved to another table, her steps as steady as ever. One of the aides, a tall man with a slicked-back ponytail, caught her glance. "Hey, you," he barked, pointing. "What are you looking at? Do you understand?" The room turned. Eyes locked on Amira. The receptionist snorted, folding her arms. "Don't think working here gives you the right to spy on royalty." Another aide snapped, his voice dripping with disgust. The manager rushed over his face, red. "Amira, go to the storage room now. You're banned from the lobby." Amira's shoulders stayed straight. She bowed slightly and said, "I didn't mean to. I only know a little Arabic." The aides burst out laughing. "Arabic," the ponytail guy said. "Since when do maids speak the language of royalty?" The receptionist joined in her laugh, sharp as glass. Amira's fingers tightened around her rag, but her face stayed calm. She turned to leave her steps slow, deliberate. As she reached the edge of the lobby, a young bellboy, barely 18, hesitated near her. He'd seen her work late nights, always quiet, always kind. He leaned in, his voice a whisper. "Don't let them get to you, Amira. They're just loud." Amira paused, her eyes softening for a moment. She gave him a small nod, barely noticeable, and kept walking. But the bellboy's words lingered, a tiny spark in the cold room. She tucked her rag into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the photo of her brother Sammy. The weight of it grounded her, kept her moving. She didn't need their approval. She never had. The Sheikh watched her, his eyes narrowing. He leaned forward and spoke again, this time in ancient Arabic, his voice low and testing. "If you understand, repeat that sentence using Hadrami prose." The room froze. Nobody knew what Hadrami prose was. Not the aides, not the manager, not even the hotel's fancy translator who was fumbling with his tablet. Amira stopped walking. She turned, placed her hands in front of her stomach in a gesture of court etiquette, and spoke. Her voice was steady, the Hadrami dialect rolling off her tongue like she'd been born to it. Perfect pronunciation, perfect cadence. A silver goblet slipped from an aide's hand, clattering to the floor. The Sheikh stood, his robes rustling. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The manager lunged forward, horrified. "Silence," he hissed, practically covering Amira's mouth. "You'll be fired." The receptionist whispered to a coworker. "She's digging her own grave." Other staff joined in, their voices a low hum of judgment. "Who does she think she is?" one said. A woman from the Sheikh's entourage, dripping in gold jewelry, screeched, "Don't let this commoner stay in the room another second." Amira bowed her head again, her voice soft but clear. "I only answered because you asked." The Sheikh raised a hand, and the room went quiet. His eyes stayed on Amira, searching her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He didn't speak, but his silence was louder than any order. In the chaos, a young woman from the entourage, her face caked in makeup, stepped forward. She pointed at Amira's blouse, her voice dripping with venom. "Look at that uniform. It's practically falling apart. You think you can stand here and play scholar?" She turned to the crowd, smirking. She probably stole it from the laundry. The room erupted in snickers. Amira's hand brushed the frayed hem of her blouse, her fingers lingering there for a moment. She didn't flinch, didn't defend herself. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly, her eyes locking with the woman's. "It's clean," she said, her voice so quiet it almost disappeared. The woman's smirk faltered, her confidence cracking under Amira's steady gaze. An older man in the entourage, a general with gray streaks in his beard, squinted at her. His hands shook as he pointed. "You were in Ankara, 2016. I remember that voice. You were Cedar Tree." The name hung in the air like smoke. Cedar Tree. The code name of a woman who translated at a top-secret military summit. Her voice the only thing that kept two nations from war. The aides exchanged glances. The manager's jaw dropped. The Sheikh sat back down, his hands clasped. "Why are you here, working as a maid?" he asked. Amira's eyes flickered just for a second, to a small photo she kept in her pocket. A faded picture of a boy, maybe 12, smiling in a dusty street. "I left," she said. "I've done enough." The Sheikh nodded, his face unreadable. "But today," he said, "I need you one more time." A junior aide, his tie too tight and his face flushed with ambition, couldn't hold back. He stepped forward, his voice loud. "This is ridiculous. She's a maid, not a diplomat." He turned to the Sheikh, gesturing wildly. "You can't seriously trust her with sensitive matters. She's probably making it up." The room murmured in agreement, the tension rising. Amira stood still, her hands folded. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. Instead, she picked up her cleaning rag, folded it neatly, and set it on the table. The gesture was so precise, so deliberate, it silenced the aide. His words trailed off, his confidence shrinking under her quiet dignity. The ponytail aide wasn't convinced. He leaned forward, sneering. "You think a few fancy words earn you a seat?" His voice was loud, meant to shame her. Could be a coincidence. Or a performance. Another aide, younger with a smug grin, chimed in. "Prove it. Respond in extinct Bedouin Arabic." The room waited, expecting her to falter. Amira didn't blink. She opened her mouth and sang a traditional folk song of the Al-Kharif tribe, her voice soft but haunting every note and word, flawless. The young aide stepped back, his face pale. "Impossible," he muttered. Only someone born in the Al-Kharif tribe would know that. Amira's eyes met his calm and steady. "I lived with that tribe for 2 years," she said. The words landed like a stone in water, rippling through the room. As the song faded, a hotel chef who'd been watching from the kitchen door dropped a tray of glasses. The crash echoed, but nobody moved. The chef, a burly man with flour on his hands, stared at Amira, his mouth open. He'd heard that song before years ago in a village far from Dubai. He stepped forward, ignoring the manager's glare. "My grandmother sang that," he said, his voice shaking. "How do you know it?" Amira turned to him, her face softening for the first time. "I listened," she said simply. The chef nodded, his eyes wet, and stepped back, clutching his apron like it was a lifeline. The sheikh stood again, this time with purpose. He extended a hand, his voice firm. "Amira Collins, I want you to come with me to Geneva." The room gasped. The manager, who'd been pacing nervously, froze. The aides scrambled to their feet, bowing. "At your service," Miss Collins one stammered, his earlier sneer gone. The receptionist's face turned gray, her hands clutching the counter. Amira untied her apron, folding it neatly over her arm. She bowed to the sheikh, her voice quiet but clear. "I don't need fame," she said. "I only want my voice used at the right time." She stepped toward the door, her plain black shoes clicking softly on the marble. Outside, news crews were already gathering, their cameras flashing. The anonymous maid was about to become a name the world wouldn't forget. Just before she stepped outside, an elderly guest, a woman with a cane and a velvet shawl, approached her. She'd been sitting quietly in the lobby, unnoticed by the entourage. Her eyes were sharp, her voice steady, despite her age. "You remind me of my daughter," she said, her fingers trembling as she touched Amira's arm. She never let them break her either. Amira paused, her hand resting on the doorframe. She looked at the woman, her expression unreadable but kind. "Thank you," she said softly, then pushed the door open. The woman watched her go, her cane tapping the floor, a quiet pride in her eyes. But that moment in the lobby wasn't the start of Amira's story. Years ago, she'd been someone else. A girl born in Yemen, raised in a family so wealthy they could buy silence. Her father was a diplomat, her mother a scholar. They taught her discipline languages, the weight of words. By 15, she spoke 8 languages, including dialects most people didn't know existed. She'd sit at her father's desk, listening to him negotiate, her small hands tracing maps of places she'd later walk. But then her brother Sammy died. An airstrike, a street he shouldn't have been on. Amira was 20, working for the UK Ministry of Defense, translating coded messages that saved lives. When she got the news, she stopped. Just stopped. She left the job, the city, the life. She wanted quiet. She wanted to disappear. One night, years before, she'd stood in a dusty Yemeni village under a sky full of stars. An old woman from the Al-Kharif tribe had taught her that folk song, her voice cracked but strong. Amira had sat by the fire, her notebook open, writing down every word. The woman had touched her hand, saying, "You carry our stories now." Amira hadn't sung since that night, not until today. In the lobby, as she folded her apron, that memory flickered in her eyes. She didn't speak of it, but her fingers lingered on the apron's edge, like she was holding on to that village, that fire, that promise. The hotel job wasn't random, though. Amira chose it. The 7-star hotel in Dubai was a place where power moved, where she could listen without being seen. She didn't need the money, her family's wealth was still there untouched. But she needed the work, the rhythm of it. Cleaning tables, folding sheets, it kept her hands busy while her mind stayed sharp. She'd hear things, deals, secrets, plans, and she'd let them pass through her like wind. But that day with the sheikh, something shifted. She didn't plan to speak. Didn't want to, but when he spoke in ancient Arabic, when he tested her, it was like Sammy's voice in her head saying, "Don't hide, Mira." Not now. In the storage room where she'd been sent to disappear, Amira stood alone for a moment. The shelves were lined with cleaning supplies, the air thick with the smell of bleach. She pulled out the photo of Sammy holding it under the dim light. His smile was wide, his eyes bright like he was about to tell her a joke. She traced his face with her thumb, her breathing slow. A coworker, an older woman who cleaned the sweets, peeked in. "You okay, Habibti?" she asked, her voice soft. Amira nodded, slipping the photo back into her pocket. "Just thinking," she said. The woman smiled, her hands rough from years of work. "You're stronger than they know," she said, then left. Amira straightened her shoulders, picked up her bucket, and walked back to the lobby. Back in the lobby, the air was different now. The aides avoided her eyes. The manager hovered, muttering apologies she didn't acknowledge. The receptionist who'd laughed loudest was nowhere to be seen. Amira stood by the Sheikh's chair, translating as he spoke to his team. Her voice was low, precise, turning ancient Arabic into English, then French, then back again. The general from Ankara watched her, his hands still shaking. He leaned toward an aide and whispered, "She saved us back then. Nobody else could have." Amira didn't react, but her fingers brushed the photo in her pocket just for a second. A journalist lingering at the edge of the room scribbled notes furiously. He'd slipped in with the news crews, his badge slightly crooked. He approached Amira during a break, his voice eager. "Miss Collins, just one question. How did you learn all this?" Amira paused, her hand resting on a chair. She looked at him, her eyes steady. "By listening," she said. The journalist waited for more, but she turned away, adjusting her skirt. His pen stopped moving, his face a mix of awe and frustration. She didn't owe him her story. She didn't owe anyone. The news spread fast. By evening, Amira's name was on every channel. The maid who spoke royalty's language, they called her. The receptionist was fired the next day. Someone leaked her comments to a gossip site, and the hotel couldn't afford the PR hit. The ponytail aide lost his job too, his name tied to a failed deal that surfaced online. The young advisor who'd challenged her to sing, he vanished from the Sheikh's circle, his social media accounts suddenly private. None of it was Amira's doing. She didn't post, didn't call, didn't gloat. She just kept moving. The Sheikh's offer wasn't just words. He meant it. Geneva was a summit, a chance to shape borders, to stop conflicts before they started. Amira didn't say yes right away. She went back to her small apartment, sat on her couch and stared at the photo of Sammy. His smile was still there, frozen in time. She thought of the Al-Harif tribe, the 2 years she had spent with them, learning their songs, their stories. She thought of Ankara, the long nights translating under pressure, knowing one wrong word could cost lives. She didn't want that weight again. But the Sheikh's voice echoed in her head. "I need you one more time." At the airport, a young girl, maybe 10, stared at Amira as she waited for her flight. The girl's mother, a tired woman with a heavy bag, nudged her. "Don't stare," she whispered. "Citizen ladies and soidis." But the girl kept looking, her eyes wide. "Is that the lady from the news?" she asked, loud enough for Amira to hear. Amira turned, her face softening. She knelt down, handing the girl a small coin from her pocket, a Yemeni rial, worn but shiny. "Keep listening," she said. The girl clutched the coin, her smile bright. Amira stood her bag over her shoulder and boarded the plane. The next morning, she packed a small bag. No fancy clothes, just her usual plain skirts and blouses. She didn't call the Sheikh's team, they'd already sent a car. At the airport, a woman in a sharp suit handed her a badge, Amira Collins, Global Head of Diplomatic Languages. Amira looked at it, her thumb tracing the letters. She didn't smile, but she nodded. The plane took off, and Dubai shrank below her. She didn't look back. In Geneva, the summit was chaos. Diplomats shouting translators, scrambling papers everywhere. Amira walked in her plain skirt, out of place among tailored suits. People stared, whispered. She didn't care. She sat at the table, her voice steady, translating dialects nobody else could. When a tense moment came, a border dispute, 2 sides refusing to budge, she spoke. One sentence in ancient Arabic, quoting a poet both sides revered. The room went quiet. The deal moved forward. Nobody mocked her now. During a break, an older diplomat, his glasses foggy, approached her. He had been at Ankara too, a junior officer then. "I never thanked you," he said, his voice low. "You kept us alive that night." Amira looked at him, her hands still. She nodded once, then turned back to her notes. The diplomat stood there, his hands clasped, like he wanted to say more, but knew she wouldn't want it. He walked away, his steps heavy, carrying the weight of a debt unpaid. As the summit continued, a young translator, barely out of college, hovered near Amira's seat. Her hands shook as she clutched her notebook, her eyes wide with admiration. "I studied your work," she whispered, her voice trembling. Your translations from Ankara, they're in my textbook. Amira paused, her pen hovering over a page. She looked at the girl, her expression soft but guarded. Keep studying, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The girl nodded, her face lighting up, and scurried back to her seat, clutching her notebook like a treasure. The news crews followed her there too. They wanted interviews, photos, her story. She gave them nothing, not a word. She'd slip out of meetings, her head low, her steps quick. But one day as she left the conference center, a reporter caught her. Miss Collins, why hide? You're a hero. Amira stopped, her eyes meeting his. I'm not hiding, she said. I'm just done talking. She turned and walked away, her bag slung over her shoulder. Back in Dubai, the hotel was different. The staff whispered her name like it was a legend. The new receptionist, a young woman with nervous hands, kept a photo of Amira on her phone, clipped from a news article. The manager sent her an email, apologizing, offering her job back. Amira didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her life wasn't there anymore. Months later, a man arrived at a summit in London. Tall, quiet, his presence like a storm cloud. Amira's husband. Nobody knew. She was married. Not the Sheikh, not the aides, not the news crews. He didn't speak much, just stood by her side as she translated. When an aide from Dubai, one who'd mocked her, saw him, he froze. The man's name didn't need saying. His family's wealth, his power, it filled the room. The aide looked away, his hands shaking. Amira didn't react. She just kept translating, her voice steady, her eyes on the papers. At a quiet moment in London, Amira stepped outside the city's lights, reflecting on the wet pavement. A street musician played a soft tune, his fingers moving over a battered guitar. The melody was familiar, an old Yemeni lullaby her mother used to sing. Amira stopped, her breath catching. She dropped a coin into his case, her fingers trembling just slightly. The musician nodded, not knowing who she was, but his eyes held hers for a moment, like he saw something she didn't say. The consequences came quietly. The receptionist's career never recovered. Her name was toxic in hospitality. The ponytail aide tried to start his own firm, but no one trusted him after the leaked deal. The young advisor was dropped by his sponsors, his smug grin gone. Amira didn't chase them down, didn't post their names. She didn't need to. The truth did the work. In the end, Amira stood at a window in London looking out at the city. Her husband was beside her, silent, his hand brushing hers. She didn't need to explain herself. Not to him, not to anyone. She'd spent her life being judged by her clothes, her job, her quiet way of moving. But she'd never bent, never begged, never lost herself. The world saw her now, not as a maid, not as a cryptographer, but as Amira. Just Amira. You know what it's like to be looked down on, don't you? To feel the sting of words meant to cut. To stand tall anyway. You're not wrong for staying quiet. You're not alone in carrying that weight. And Amira's story, it's proof you don't have to shout to be heard. Where were you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.